Good afternoon, I'm Leila Masimova and you're watching A News. Now the major stories make headlines today. Israel strikes Yemen's Hoda port, hitting a salmon factory with dozens injured. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu votes intensive expanded offensive after his security cabinet approves Gaza plans. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth orders the Pentagon to cut top military positions by 20%. Israel has launched a wave of airstrikes on Yemen's Hoda port and surrounding areas. Targets included a major cement factory with the strikes leaving dozens injured and causing widespread destruction. The attack came just a day after Houthi rebels fired a missile that landed near Israel's Ben Gurion airport, injuring 6 people.
Israel launched a wave of retaliatory airstrikes on Yemen's Hoda province. According to the Israel Defense Forces, 20 fighter jets struck dozens of Houthi targets in and around the strategic Red Sea port city. Large fires erupted at the Bajil cement factory located east of Hoda after it was hit by 4 airstrikes. Local sources reported more than 10 additional strikes on the port itself and nearby neighbourhoods. The Houthi-run Health Ministry reported at least 21 injuries, later rising to 2 dead and over 35 wounded. Authorities sealed off the port and factory area as emergency crews responded to the damage. The airstrikes followed a ballistic missile attack by Houthi rebels on Sunday. That missile landed near Israel's Ben Gurion airport, injuring 6 civilians. The Houthis later threatened to impose a comprehensive aerial blockade on Israel, warning that it would continue to target Israeli airports and urging international airlines to cancel flights. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened his security cabinet and later oversaw the military operation from an Air Force command centre. Hoda is Yemen's second largest port and a critical entry point for humanitarian aid, handling more than 80% of the country's food imports. The Israeli military claims that the port has been used to smuggle Iranian weapons to the Houthis. It also claims the targeted cement factory was being used to support tunnel construction and other military activities. The Houthis have accused both Israel and the United States of carrying out the attack. While the United States denies involvement in this specific operation, it continues to conduct its own military campaign against Houthi targets across Yemen.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the next phase of Israel's war against Hamas will be intensive, following approval of a new operational plan. The announcement comes amid stalled ceasefire talks and a worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. International reactions have also raised growing concern.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a new intensive phase in Israel's military offensive against Hamas. He confirmed that reservists are being called up and said commanders recommended escalating the 18-month war. Netanyahu stated the goal is to defeat Hamas and free the hostages still in Gaza.
Last night we stayed up late in the cabinet and decided on an intensified operation in Gaza. It was the Chief of Staff's recommendation to proceed, as he put it, toward the defeat of Hamas. And along the way, he believes this will also help us rescue the hostages, and I agree with him. We are not letting go of this effort, and we will not give up on anyone.
The newly approved plan includes expanding ground operations, relocating hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to Gaza's south, and maintaining a prolonged Israeli military presence in the enclave. Officials say the timing of the offensive remains fluid and may depend on US President Donald Trump's upcoming visit to the Middle East. While far-right members of Netanyahu's coalition have welcomed the escalation, international and domestic critics are warning of worsening conditions. Public opposition inside Israel is growing. In Jerusalem, demonstrators clashed with police outside parliament, accusing Netanyahu of prolonging the war for political survival.
I'm tired of this war that never ends. We don't want to fight a war that only keeps Netanyahu in power. We want the hostages back. We want our soldiers back. Our kids are being sent to a purposeless war.
We would like to see all the hostages back as soon as possible. We don't agree with the war that is for the benefit of the dictator and not benefit of all of us.
International reactions remain cautious, with the European Union urging restraint and calling for negotiations and humanitarian aid to Gaza. The United Nations rejected a new plan for aid distribution, describing it as an Israeli-controlled system of hubs. Meanwhile, at the White House, President Trump addressed humanitarian concerns but avoided commenting directly on the Israeli operation.
We're going to help the people of Gaza get some food. People are starving, and we're going to help them get some food. A lot of people are making it very, very bad. If you look, Hamas is making it impossible because they're taking everything that's brought in. But we're going to help the people of Gaza because they're being treated very badly by Hamas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Thank you, everyone.
Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, Israeli officials say the offensive will begin gradually, with a full-scale campaign possible if no deal is reached. Hamas has not directly responded to the military threat. However, it condemned Israel's revised aid plan, calling it political blackmail. The group also accused Israel of using humanitarian relief as a weapon in violation of international law.
In a move that could reshape the U.S. military hierarchy, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered a major reduction in the number of senior generals and admirals. The shake-up comes at the part of a broader reforms under President Donald Trump's second term.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Monday announced a sweeping plan to cut at least 20% of the military's 4-star and flag officer positions, calling the upper ranks bloated and inefficient. The changes affect all service branches, including the National Guard, and could lead to the merging of major combat commands across the globe.
We're back with more DoD reforms. This one is General and Flag Officer Reductions. That's the official title. My title is Less Generals, More GIs. It's a historic one, and it's in keeping with President Trump's commitment to achieving peace through strength.
Hegseth says the move is aimed at shifting resources away from top-heavy headquarters and toward combat readiness.
More generals and admirals does not equal more success. Now, this is not a slash-and-burn exercise meant to punish high-ranking officers. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Phase 1 includes a minimum 20% reduction of 4-star and flag officers in active duty and the National Guard. Phase 2 will add at least another 10%, along with a potential reorganization of the U.S. military's global command map.
We confront a complex and evolving threat environment. We cannot afford to wait. We got to be lean and mean, and in this case, it means general officer reductions.
But critics say the cuts may damage military effectiveness. U.S. Senator Jack Reed called the move arbitrary, warning it could cripple the armed forces by eliminating highly skilled leadership without clear justification. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is still reviewing whether to merge key commands, such as U.S. Africa Command with European Command, or Northern and Southern Commands, moves that could eliminate even more 4-star positions.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's offer to send American troops into Mexico to fight drug cartels, an offer made during recent bilateral talks. The move comes as the U.S. military personnel were seen reinforcing barbed wire fencing along the border near Ciudad Juarez on Monday. Trump has warned of unilateral military action if Mexico fails to dismantle cartels. But Sheinbaum insisted any cooperation must respect national sovereignty. The two leaders have held multiple calls in recent months covering security, migration and trade. U.S. President Donald Trump said some of the trade deals being negotiated with countries might be announced this week. As markets closely watch for developments, our Obi Shabandar brings the latest from Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump has indicated that a trade deal with some countries could be announced this week, as he has sought to address market concerns about the repercussions of a global trade war. President Trump told reporters this weekend that he is willing to consider alleviating the massive 145% tariff on Chinese imports. The opening for a potential thaw in Beijing-Washington trade relations is reassuring to some investors. Beijing has said that it is evaluating approaches from U.S. officials to start negotiations about tariffs. China has reportedly compiled a list of American goods exempt from its 125% tariff, aiming to ease trade relations without making any public concessions. President Trump has said that he believes that his tariffs have caused China significant economic pain, and he recognizes that a deal has to be made with Beijing at some point, though it would have to be made on terms favorable to the United States. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this weekend, where he credited President Trump's policies for finding solutions to the loss of manufacturing jobs and the decline in real income in America. The administration says all these things were caused by trade liberalization and offshoring production to China over the past few decades. President Trump has himself recognized that his trade policies and tariffs on China will likely have an impact on consumer consumption in the U.S., but that ultimately the net benefits would outweigh the short-term losses. I'm Ubi Shabander in Washington, D.C., A News.
German Conservative leader Friedrich Merz failed to garner the parliamentary majority needed to become Chancellor on Tuesday, an unexpected setback for his new coalition with the centre-left Social Democrats. The lower house of parliament, or Bundestag, now has 14 days to elect Merz or another candidate chancellor with an outright majority. Merz's conservative CDU-CSU bloc won national elections in February, but with 28.5% of the vote, it needs at least one partner. Merz agreed to form a coalition with the Social Democrats, who won just 16.4%, their worst result in German post-war history. Russia claims its air defense destroyed over 20 Ukrainian drones in a second night of aerial attacks near Moscow. Authorities say flights were suspended at the airports and the drone damaged an airport block and apartment block. No casualties were reported. Ukraine has not confirmed the strikes, but says Russia launched overnight drone attacks on Kharkiv and Odessa. Kyiv reports 4 people injured in Kharkiv and 1 killed in Odessa, with fires and damage across residential areas. Both sides accuse each other of escalating drone warfare. The recently signed U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal is set to grant Washington preferential access to Ukraine's natural resources. Efforts to develop mining operations in the country, however, could face significant delays given the security situation and outdated geological information, according to industry experts cited by the Washington Post.
A highly publicized US-Ukraine mineral extraction agreement, initially promoted as a step forward in strategic cooperation, is encountering substantial logistical and economic hurdles. Specialists indicate that outdated Soviet-era maps and the absence of contemporary geological research are major barriers, potentially delaying effective extraction for at least a decade. Under the agreement, the US has secured rights to mine critical minerals such as titanium, lithium, and graphite, resources essential for manufacturing weapons, electronics, and batteries. The deal also covers oil and gas extraction rights, with proceeds intended to help finance Ukraine's post-conflict. However, analysts stress that practical benefits to the US supply chain from these operations are distant. Reed Blakemore, director at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center, highlighted the deal's limitations, stating, "This absolutely is not a solution to immediate supply chain issues. It does not address the short-term vulnerabilities related to China's dominance over these resources." Ukraine's mineral extraction sector has suffered from chronic underinvestment, and reliable geological data remains sparse. CDM Engineering, for example, has only recently begun testing groundwater around the Polokivska lithium deposit in the Kirovohrad region. Furthermore, Ukraine currently has no confirmed reserves of the critical rare earth metals necessary for defense and electronics manufacturing. The ongoing conflict adds further complexity. Significant oil and gas fields are located in areas heavily affected by the war, leading to infrastructure damage that makes operations risky and costly. Energy expert Ben Cahill from the University of Texas at Austin explained, larger companies with opportunities elsewhere may not find Ukraine competitive enough to justify investment, although smaller firms might still consider the risks. Furthermore, critical mineral expert Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes points out the economic challenges, noting the substantial risks associated with early-stage exploration. We struggle to raise investment for mineral exploration, even in stable locations like the US and Australia, she said, so it will be significantly harder in Ukraine. Processing the extracted minerals also presents environmental and logistical challenges, with damaged transport and energy infrastructure, further complicating operations. Despite these challenges, some observers remain optimistic. Jay Truesdale, CEO of TD International, noted the strategic significance, saying, "The deal signals US commitment to Ukraine's economy, potentially offering positive investment outcomes in the long term." Ultimately, while the agreement symbolizes strategic alignment between the US and Ukraine, tangible benefits to resource supply chains remain uncertain and are unlikely to materialize in the near future.
Explosions and fires struck Sudan's Port Sudan on Tuesday, marking the third day of attacks on the previously safe Red Sea city. Thick black smoke was seen rising near the country's main port as drone strikes hit key sites, including the city's Orly International Airport, a major hotel near the presidential palace and a military base, according to witnesses. The military blames Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, for the attack, though the group has not commented. One drone also struck a fuel depot near the southern port, where UN offices and aid agencies had relocated from Khartoum. Now to the regional news. An invitation has been extended to US President Donald Trump to visit Uzbekistan during the recent visit of an Uzbek delegation to the United States. Alvareza Kalimurzanen has the details.
In over 30 years of independence, no sitting US president has ever visited Central Asia. President Donald Trump could be the first if he accepts. US Ambassador to Uzbekistan Jonathan Hennick said that the invitation was extended as relations between the two countries continued to strengthen and that it was met with a positive reaction from Trump's team. According to Hennick, after more than 30 years of independence of the countries of the region, now is the most appropriate time for the visit of the American president. The invitation is likely timed to coincide with the C5+1 summit, which marks its 10th anniversary this year. The platform brings together the United States and the 5 Central Asian nations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has previously emphasized that bolstering the initiative is a key U.S. priority, especially given the current geopolitical volatility. Washington's interest in Central Asia goes beyond diplomacy. As global competition intensifies, the region is emerging as a new geopolitical hotspot. With its reserves of strategically critical minerals, Central Asia has gained renewed importance for the US. Trump has already announced plans to ramp up domestic production of rare earth elements. And experts believe that deeper cooperation with the region is only a matter of time. Alongside Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan may play a pivotal role in this strategy. Tashkent has pursued a relatively balanced foreign policy, maintaining some distance from both Beijing and Moscow. The US has supported Uzbekistan's efforts to join the World Trade Organization, and last year the two countries signed an agreement to expand access to American markets. Central Asia has not been a primary focus of U.S. foreign policy in recent years. However, with Trump's return to the political stage, a potential visit to Central Asia could signal a shift in U.S. strategy and an effort to rebuild relations with the region under new terms. Pharmaceutical Murzina, A News, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Now joining us, Richard Spooner, Advisory Board Member, Caspian Policy Center from Astana. Great to have you with us, Mr. Spooner.
Nice to be with you today.
Mr. Spooner, if I may ask you, is this an opportune moment for US President Donald Trump to visit to Central Asia?
I think, yes, it's an opportune moment. Of course, we don't know what's going on behind the curtain in the administration in Washington, so we're not sure exactly how they will decide to evaluate this moment. But given the heightened attention to critical minerals, this would certainly be an opportune moment.
And could we now expect a more forward-leaning US foreign policy in the region?
I'm not sure I would go that far. I think that the administration is interested in transactions, for instance, transactions about critical minerals. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard anything about a more activist position towards Central Asia from the Trump administration. So we'll just have to wait and see. I think it's a good thing that President Mirziyoyev has invited President Trump to visit Uzbekistan. I hope very much that President Trump accepts that invitation and makes that trip. We'll just have to see.
All right. Thank you for your insightful answers, Mr. Spooner.
My pleasure.
The development of economic and trade relations between Azerbaijan and Belarus was discussed during the business forum held in Baku in May 5. Several important agreements were signed to strengthen cooperation between the two countries in trade and industry.
The Azerbaijan-Belarus Business Forum held in Baku on the 5th of May focused on developing economic and trade relations between the two countries. 12 documents worth a total of about $19 million were signed at the event, including agreements on the supply of plywood and laminate flooring, as well as discussions on establishing new logistics ties with Beltamoj Service. Belarus officials mentioned that Azerbaijan is strategically important for the country as a transit hub for delivering export products to Iran, Kuwait and the UAE. Prime Minister of Belarus, Alexander Turchin, who arrived in Baku to participate at the business forum, also met with Azerbaijani Prime Minister Ali Asadov to discuss key areas of cooperation. Asadov emphasized the importance of strengthening intergovernmental ties. During the meeting, cooperation agreements were signed in the fields of trade, industry and social sectors. A memorandum of agreement on the supply of tractors and municipal equipment was signed between the Ganja automobile plant and the Minsk tractor plant. Additionally, a memorandum was signed with Belarus's National Electronic Services Center to enhance social sector collaboration.
Baku hosted an international conference dedicated to Azerbaijan's pharmaceutical industry. Talks and panels were held on topics of cooperation in the sector and the development of production.
Baku hosted the international conference, the Pharmaceutical Industry of Azerbaijan, yesterday, today and tomorrow, organised by Azerbaijan's Health Ministry and the Embassy of Hungary. Speakers highlighted the growth of Azerbaijan's pharmaceutical sector and new production sites. Hungarian Ambassador Tamás Torma noted the key role of pharmaceuticals in bilateral trade and stressed expanding academic cooperation. The pharmaceutical industry was highlighted as strategic for health and the economy, with special emphasis on Piralahi Industrial Park and the Azerbaijan Medical University's pharmacy faculty.
I would like to highlight that we have very strong political relationship between our two countries, characterized by a very strong bond between our leaders. and this strong partnership and sympathy, mutual sympathy, can be felt in every part of the society when I talk to Azerbaijani people. So there are very, very strong bonds. And what is interesting here, that pharmaceutical industry very well reflects the strengths and the intensivity and the friendly nature of our bonds between our countries.
Azerbaijan has invested over 6.9 billion manats in industrial zones, creating more than 10,000 jobs. The Piralahi Industrial Park, established in 2016, is the first specialized pharmaceutical zone, with 7 companies operating and expansion plans underway. Key projects include a joint plant with Turkish Gen Ilaç, Scandens in Hürkmeli, and Biopharmax in the Alyat Free Economic Zone. In 2024, pharmaceutical production rose by 81.5%, reaching 20 million manats, with medicine production up by 4%. To support local production, a tax and customs incentive mechanism has been implemented, granting exemptions for projects worth 50 million manats.
Thank you for spending a moment with AN News. Until we meet again.